All right, so good morning, everyone. So welcome to our Statistics Day Symposium. And this is a tradition, like annual event for our integrated health science core from the M-LEEaD, which is Universal Mission Life Stage Environmental Exposures and Disease Center. They have been holding this event for many years. So every year we identify a theme for the statistics or the statistical tools that we use in environmental health sciences. So this year, we have a few discussions last summer. Like we found that AI, the techniques are growing so fast, and the research and education are both influenced by this a lot. So we were thinking for the environmental health sciences, for our research, how can we leverage those tools for our field? So that is why we start to looking for the big names who are working in the AI, and we found this keynote speaker, and we were so lucky when I wrote an email to him, and he said, yes, I can. Oh my God, I was so excited when I got the reply from him. So that is our keynote speaker, Dr. Jason Moore. So thank you for joining us today. So basically, that is our morning section, and following that, we'll have our delicious food. And I would love to thank Meredith and Rose for helping me organizing this, and then the other very, very delicious food for you guys. And then after that, in the afternoon, we also have another session. And this year we changed it a little bit. Instead of to have panel sections, and this year we invited 3 speakers. They are local junior faculty members who are very active in the field of AIs. And they will talk to us about their research in this AI field. And in the meanwhile, I specifically asked them to, share some thoughts they have about how to apply these techniques to the environmental health sciences research. So that is our afternoon section. So without further ado, I will move to our next. Let's do Oh, there we go. So there is a speaker, but I didn't find it. Anyway, so I need to bring up my cheat sheet to introduce our speakers today. And our keynote speaker has a long list of awards and honors, so that's why I have this cheat sheet. Okay, so Professor Jason Moore is actually an alumnus from University of Michigan, so go blue. He actually holds 3 degrees from University of Michigan. Professor Moore is currently the founding chair of the Department of Computational Biomedicine and director of the Center for Artificial Intelligence Research and Education at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He is the former Senior Associate Dean for Informatics and Edward Rose Professor of Informatics at the University of Pennsylvania. He is also the founding director of the Advanced Computing Center for Research and Education at Vanderbilt University from 2000 to 2004, and founding director of the Institute for Quantitative Biomedical Sciences at Dartmouth College from 2010 until 2015. He holds several endowed chairs at Vanderbilt, Dartmouth, and the University of Pennsylvania. He was also elected or selected as the Penn Fellow, which is pretty prestigious. So when I look at his career path, I was also talking to him this morning. I feel like he's making a lot of big impact at different locations and to fund those very important centers and departments. So Professor Moore is the editor-in-chief of the Biodata Mining Journal since 2008. His research focuses on the development and the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning methods for modeling complex patterns in biomedical big data. More recent work of him focuses on the computational method, such as tree-based pipeline optimization tool for augmented machine learning and data sciences. His current work also focuses on methods and software for accessible artificial intelligence, which are very important. He has published more than 500 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, and editorials. His translational bioinformatics research program has been continuously funded by multiple grants from the NIH for more than 20 years. He was selected as a Kavli Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, and he is elected fellow for American Association of the Advancement of Science, American College of Medical Informatics, American Statistical Association, the International Academy of Health Sciences Informatics, and elected member for the International Statistics Institute. So we are very honored and excited to have him with us today. Welcome him. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thanks so much for that generous introduction, and thanks so much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here. I never turned down an invitation to come to the University of Michigan. So keep that in mind, always happy to come. And I'll be back here in June for a workshop, in fact. So try to get here every chance I get. I really, really loved being a student here. So for the students in the room, make the most of your experience here. This is one of the world's great universities, and just soak it all up and take advantage of everything this university has to offer, and find your way outside your department and take advantage of across the entire campus. So I'm going to talk to you today about automated machine learning and accessible AI. And the claim I'm going to make to get you interested in what I have to say is that I'm going to present to you a tool that would allow anybody to do machine learning by pushing a button. In fact, a 2-year-old can do machine learning with the tool that I'm going to show you. And that's my goal, is to democratize AI and machine learning so that absolutely everybody can make use of it, including toxicologists, environmental health science researchers, et cetera. So I've always had a love for the environmental health sciences, and when I was at Dartmouth, I was involved in the Superfund program there, and then when I went to Penn, ran a data science core for an environmental health science center at P30 there as well from NIHS. And so I've learned to think about adverse outcome pathways and to think about the role of toxic chemicals and moving their way through our biology to affecting health outcomes. While at Dartmouth, the Superfund program there is really heavy into studying the effect of arsenic. And so I spent a lot of time looking at arsenic gene interactions and on risk of bladder cancer. And so I'm really happy to be here with all of you today, because I do have a strong passion for the environment. And this is a figure that was developed here at the University of Michigan by my PhD advisor, Charlie Singh. In fact, when I was a student here in the 1990s, I saw the evolution of this figure, and this is a polished version of it that was published in 2003. But this slide is really meant to illustrate that health is not determined by genes alone or environment alone, that it's genes, environment working together in time and space that really gives rise to individual risk of particular common diseases. Coronary artery disease is shown here. And this has really been a motivation for my research my entire career, going back to my PhD time here, is thinking about the complexity of human health. And that's where machine learning and AI comes into play, because we need those kinds of tools to embrace the complexity and embrace the complexity of the data that we have available to us. I saw this on the NIH website. This is a summary of the NIHS council meeting that was held in October at NIH. And you can see that AI was a theme that ran through that meeting. They had AI speakers, and NIHS is recognizing AI as an important tool for addressing environmental health problems. And I'm really happy to see this because, when I was part of their Superfund program, AI was really something they did not talk about. So it's nice to see the evolution of the interest in AI. So this slide really captures a lot of what I'm thinking about today. And I fundamentally believe that we have the tools and technology to make data access and data analysis easy and routine. We don't take advantage of it, but we could. And this is a major motivator for my research program right now. So imagine a kiosk like this out here in the hallway, and you could just walk up, the data is all there, all your population level data, your experimental data is all in a database. And you walk up to the kiosk with a scientific question, and you just say your question. I'm interested in the relationship between dioxin and these genes and this disease. The computer, the AI, understands what you're saying through natural language processing, pulls the data out of the database. Then you say, okay, now I want to clean the data using these methods. The AI takes over, automatically cleans your data. Then you say, I want to use machine learning to analyze these data and develop a predictive model of health outcomes. The AI understands that, automatically does the machine learning, and then evaluates the model and then presents it in a form that you can deploy it, say here at University of Michigan Hospital. I believe that we have the technology to do that today. It's just a matter of investing the resources and the time to piece these things together to make that happen. And you can imagine a world where access to data and data analysis is that easy. That puts this powerful technology at the fingertips of absolutely everybody, regardless of your background, your training, and your expertise. And I believe that if we can do that, we're going to advance research much faster than what we currently do, which is a very time-consuming process that can take months or years to get through data cleaning and data analysis. And so I'm going to focus mostly today on this middle part, but I'm starting to tackle some of these other areas like data cleaning as well. So this is my vision for the near future, is that we can make all of this super, super easy. Now, machine learning is going to be the focus of the talk today, building machine learning models for making predictions about health outcomes, for example. And what I would say is that machine learning right now is hard. It's hard even for experts. And one of the challenges is that there are so many different machine learning methods to choose from, and each of them looks at the data in a different way. And that's what's shown on this slide here, where you have 3 data sets here on the left, and a bunch of machine learning models in the different columns. And you can think of the red dots maybe as cases and the blue dots as controls. The X and the Y are variables that you have measured, maybe levels of 2 different toxic metals in the environment. And what machine learning is trying to do is build a mathematical function that discriminates the red dots and the blue dots. And you can see that each of these different methods looks at the data in a different way. Some are drawing straight lines through the data, some are drawing circles, some are drawing squares through the data. And this is what machine learning is trying to do, is come up with that decision boundary that allows you to predict red from blue, and the numbers represent the performance. But one of the challenges is you don't know what the patterns are that you're looking for when you start a data analysis. So how do you know what the right machine learning method is to pick? And you can see in these examples, some methods do well on some data sets, but they don't do well on other data sets. So this is a huge challenge. This is a paper we published a few years ago illustrating this point, where we took over 150 data sets, different data sets, exhaustively ran a bunch of different machine learning methods, each tuned for the hyperparameters. And you can see that for some data sets, like those between 20 and 30, each machine learning method, the darker the blue, the better the performance. Some perform equally on all data on those data sets. But if you look at, say, numbers 70 through 90, some machine learning methods perform better than others. And you can see there's quite a bit of heterogeneity in performance. So this reinforces this idea that different machine learning methods perform differently on different data sets. Now, choosing a machine learning method is just part of the problem. What you really need to do to develop a predictive model is to build a whole pipeline with different operators. So, if you're working with omics data, you might have hundreds of thousands or millions of variables to work with. That's a lot. You might want to do what's called feature selection, which is to reduce the size of the number of variables that you're working with, and there are a bunch of different algorithms for doing that. So that introduces a whole decision-making process. The data doesn't always come to us in the right representation, so we might need to engineer the data in a certain way. That's what's called feature engineering, and there are a bunch of algorithms for doing that. And I covered picking the machine learning algorithms, and even once you have a machine learning algorithm that you think is good, there are a bunch of different evaluation metrics that you could use. And then once you have a model that you think is a good model, then the hard work begins. You get into the space of what's called explainable AI, which is, do you understand the model, what it's telling you? Is the model usable? Can you put it in the cloud or put it in a server and use it? Is it useful? Does the model actually do what you intended it to do? For example, if you build a model and the model says, well, gender, age, and zip code are the key predictors of disease risk, well, you can't change someone's disease risk because you can't change someone's age, you can't change somebody's zip code. So that model might be a good model at predicting, but it might not be useful because you can't really improve health using that model. And is it interpretable? Does it teach you something about biology at the end of the day? So these are all really important questions that we need to answer about models. So again, my goal is to democratize AI and machine learning so that everybody can benefit. And I think this is going to be important if we really are going to translate these models to improve human health or improve the health of populations. So I'm deeply interested in how we as humans make decisions about how to do analysis. So if I was to give everybody in this room a data set and said, I'll stay and we'll come back to this room a week from now and you can do absolutely any analysis you want to, and we'll come back in a week and compare notes. Everybody in this room would take a different path through that data set based on your background, your training, your expertise, your experience. Some would maybe use parametric statistical methods or use causal methods or use machine learning or particular machine learning methods, but everybody would take a different path. And we as humans are natural tinkers. What do we do with a data set? We try what we think is the best method that we feel the most comfortable with. And then we try other things to see if we get better results, right? So we tinker with the data, we tinker with the analytic strategy until we get something we feel comfortable with that we think will survive peer review and et cetera. So I'm interested in this process. How do we as humans make those decisions? How do we find our way through a data set? And more importantly, can we get a computer to do that? And that's where AI comes into this. Can we get a computer to tinker with data and make the kinds of analytic decisions that we as humans make with the goal of automating the analysis? So in 2015, I went to a computer science conference, an AI conference, and saw this guy, Randy Olson, give a talk. He was a PhD student, finishing a PhD in computer science up the road at Michigan State University. And I was blown away by this guy and thought, wow, I need to convince him to come do a postdoc with me. So I went to talk to him after his talk, and he told me he was going to industry. And after a couple cups of coffee, I convinced him to come do a postdoc with me, and he did. And so he joined my lab at the University of Pennsylvania in the summer of 2015. And we spent that summer brainstorming what he would work on. And he came to me one day and said, I really want to try to automate machine learning. I want to develop an algorithm that can build a machine learning pipeline from scratch automatically. So I thought that was a great idea, and we sketched, spent days at the whiteboard sketching out ideas, and we came up with something, and he went off and did the programming and came back after a few months with what we call the tree-based pipeline optimization tool, or TPOT, as an open source, open access, automated machine learning algorithm. This is on our GitHub page. And what we didn't realize at the time, we just were having fun and developing a neat algorithm, but what it ended, what happened was, it ended up, we were one of the very first in the world to automate machine learning in this way. And just to give you an example of that, Google didn't release its first automated machine learning method till 2018. So almost 3 years after we did. I don't brag very much about my work, but I like to brag that we were 3 years ahead of Google, because you don't get to say that very often. So they learned from us, and there were a few other groups around the world, a couple in Europe, that were also at the same time developing and releasing automated machine learning methods. So we were really on the bleeding edge of this new technology. This is the very first book on automated machine learning that came out in 2019. Frank Cutter, the lead editor, developed one of the first automated machine learning methods, the autosclern approach, and we have a chapter on Teapot in this book. And so what I want to do today is, I'm not going to talk about Teapot. Teapot's very powerful, and if you're interested, I would definitely recommend taking a look. We have a second version of Teapot 2, that's on our GitHub page. But what I want to do today is tell you about our next generation automated machine learning software that we developed, building on our experience with Teapot, to make it user-friendly and accessible to everybody. So that's what we call Aliro. So the goal is to develop an automated approach, an AI that can automatically do machine learning, but do so at the push of a button, so that you can do this, anybody can do this. So let me just take you through the components of building an AI to do machine learning for you. The first thing we needed was a code base, and we used what's called the scikit-learn library, which is a Python library, very professionally developed. It's probably the most commonly used library for machine learning. It does pretty much every machine learning method, supervised, unsupervised. It has tons of pre-processing algorithms. It can do data cleaning, it can do feature selection, feature engineering, et cetera. So we use this as the code base. So the AI needs a code base to work with for automated machine learning. So the next thing we needed was a controller. We needed a way for the AI to get a data set, pick an algorithm, run it on a server, and get the results and do something with the results. Now, we started coding this ourselves, and I discovered this open source project on GitHub called Future Gadget Lab, which came out of a group in France, and which did exactly what we wanted. So we were able to adopt this as our controller. The next thing we needed was a database, a memory. If the AI is going to learn from experience like we as humans do, it needs a memory of every machine learning analysis that it's done or that you've done. So we use a type of database called a document store, and specifically we use an open access database called MongoDB. Document stores are nice because they're really easy to get data in and get data out compared to a relational database, which requires a lot of work. So what we do is we code every machine learning analysis. Think of it as coded on a piece of paper. We have the description of the data, we have the description of the machine learning method, the parameters that were used, and the results all get coded, and that piece of paper gets deposited in MongoDB. We have a memory of it, it all is indexed, and then we can search and pull that out later. So this is the database that our AI is going to use as its memory bank for learning how to do machine learning. So then the last piece we needed was an AI to orchestrate all of this learning and automation. And what we ended up using is a type of AI called a recommender system, which all of you have used recommender systems without knowing it, because that's what Amazon and other e-commerce sites use. This is an actual screenshot of my Amazon page about a month after I moved from Philadelphia to LA. And you can see that Amazon knows I've moved because what is it recommending to me? It's recommended to me pots and pans, Brita filters, office supplies, smart home devices. I'm not sure why it's recommending women's jeans to me, but that might have something to do with my wife's shopping at the same time. But you get the idea that Amazon has learned what people buy when they move, and somehow it knew that I had moved, probably because I changed the zip code in my Amazon account. And so it's recommending things to me that I might want to buy. And so that's what a recommender system does. It learns from experience and makes recommendations based on that experience. So that's the kind of AI that we developed for our system because we wanted to learn from prior machine learning analyses and then recommend the next best machine learning method to run on a particular data set. All right, the last thing we needed was a way for you, the user, to do this seamlessly and intuitively. And so when you log into Aliro, you log in through a web browser. This is what you see. Every square on the screen is a different data set. And we summarize the best result found thus far. So for that appendicitis data set in the top left, you can see that there are 46 machine learning results in the database for this data set. And the best one is a support vector classifier with a almost 81% predictive accuracy. So you get a snapshot of where the results are at for that data set. But to do machine learning, all you have to do is push the AI button denoted by the yellow arrow there. So you push that button, the recommender system takes over and starts launching what it thinks are the best machine learning analyses for your data set based on its experience, just like you as a human would. So it's that easy. You load your data set as a CSV file, you push that button, you're doing machine learning. Now you can push the blue button on that screen, and if you want to do a manual machine learning analysis, choose your own machine learning. We have some preset machine learning, commonly used machine learning methods like random forest and logistic regression. When you click on one, it populates some discrete parameter choices. You choose your parameters, hit launch experiment, and you're doing machine learning. No coding involved. You just push a few buttons and you're doing machine learning. Now, the neat thing about this is that's human guided machine learning. You can still do what you think is your best machine learning method. But what's neat about that is that result also goes in the database, and the AI is going to learn from your experience as well, in addition to the machine learning analysis that the AI runs. Now, when it finishes, you get a table that looks like this. Every row is a different machine learning result. You can sort it based on the accuracy, the predictive accuracy of the method. These are all results for one particular data set. You can see the different algorithms. Now you can do a couple things from this screen. You can click on the algorithms menu item at the top, and you can dig in and see the parameter settings and get some more details about the machine learning. But if you click on the action arrow over on the right, you can download the model and you can download the Python code that generates that model. So Aliro not only does the machine learning for you, but it writes the Python code for you automatically. So then you can take the code, you can study it, you can manipulate it, you can apply it to other data sets, you can validate it, you can modify it. So there's full transparency. The software is open source. The code that generates the model is open access. So there's full transparency of what's going on here, which is nice because commercial software doesn't do that for you. Now, if you click on a result, we have a nice dashboard where we summarize performance metrics and we carry into the RFC curve, and we provide some interpretation options like feature importance scores, or if you know what Shapley values are, we provide those as well, which allow you to start to decompose what the important variables or features are in the model. So this is Aliro. Maybe I'll stop there and just quickly see if there are any questions before I move on and tell you about how we evaluated it, a real data example, and then I'm going to tell you about some of the new tools that we've developed, that we're developing right now to enhance the functionality of this. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. No, you go ahead. Sorry, you go ahead. Me or her? Oh.
How about back first, and then we'll come.
Okay. First, this is amazing. I absolutely love it. My question is, what happens if you have bad data going into it? Because the thing that automatically comes to my mind, well, what if we have 8-week-old mice and we're interested in age acceleration, but technically they're adolescents? So what happens if you have like all these different factors and you can't see a phenotype yet? How do you go about training a model where you're not sure what the outcome is?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you need a solid scientific question, mm-hmm. and you need your data formatted such that you can answer that question using this tool. So you still need data that is consistent with the question that you're asking, because the AI knows nothing about your data.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to show you sort of a step in the direction of where we can get the AI maybe to do more interesting things with your data. I'm going to show that in a few minutes. But my recommendation is make sure you have data that can answer your question right off the bat before you give it to an AI.
Okay, so I guess it can't be predictive yet, right?
Right.
Yes, okay, got it.
Right. Machine learning has to train on known examples, right? So you have to have your outcome already measured. So the machine learning can build a model for it. And then once you have a model, you can make predictions where you don't have those labels, those outcome labels yet.
Yeah, I have more questions, but I'll let you.
Yeah, my question is very much related to her. Basically, my question was directly about the model fit and predictability and all this. How can you know about it? How reliable the model is, basically.
So we provide a lot of statistics and performance metrics in the output. But like I said, you can take the model and you can take the Python code and do whatever else you want to do to feel comfortable with that model so that you're not bound by our tool.
But it will give some model like characteristics or something like
Yeah,
that.
so this screen here shows we provide a whole bunch of different commonly used performance metrics from machine learning, like the area under the ROC curve, balanced accuracy, precision, recall, et cetera. We provide a 95% confidence interval on the ROC curve. And so there's a wide range of different performance metrics here that are built in. But if you don't see something that you want, this is open source. Theoretically, you could go and add, with a little bit of programming, you could add your own performance metrics in here if they're not already listed. Or you could take the Python code and add and combine that with other performance metrics. Yeah.
Nature machine learning has lots of parameters need to be tuned.
Yeah.
It's all integrated into the machine learning.
Yeah. So it automatically tunes the hyperparameters. Yeah. So that's one of the things it learns is what parameter settings are giving good solution. And you can drill in and see all the hyperparameter settings in the results.
Thank you.
Yeah, which LLM are y'all using to generate the code for y'all?
What?
The large language model that y'all are using to generate the code?
So there's the Python code. So Aliro is choosing an algorithm from scikit-learn. It's applying that algorithm. The code's already written, right? It's in a library. It's applying that code to the data, calculating certain performance metrics. And what we do is take that pipeline that's created behind the scenes and then turn that into Python code. There's no large language model at this point, but I'm going to talk about large language models in a minute. So it doesn't need a large language model to write the Python code to do the analysis because we know the steps, we know exactly what's happening, and we can easily turn that into code.
Yeah, so my question is also about evaluation of your machine learning method. So I understand you already demonstrated some performance measures, but sometimes if you use different metric, actually you will choose different method. But I saw like in your earlier slide, you will automatically recommend one, the final method. How did you decide that? Or what? Is there a tuning or option where you can specify those?
So this is a very different paradigm because what Aliro's doing is it's learning from every analysis that it has access to. So if you have 10 data sets in there and you're running analyses on all 10 data sets, all that goes in a database and it's learning from that experience. It's learning what methods tend to get better results on what types of data, what hyperparameters tend to get better results. And that's what it's recommending and running for future analyses. So it's the best way I can describe it is it's much more similar to how a human data scientist would approach a problem.
But even for human health data scientists, like when I was analyzing the data using my methods, I have several options. If my purpose is to predict better versus to fit the data better, or versus to provide a interpret or meaningful decision tool, then my final decision on which method to choose actually is also
Right.
depending on your purpose.
Yeah, so the AI is figuring that out, right? It's learning from experience and making decisions about what methods to run. But let me show the evaluation and a real data example maybe that'll give you a little clearer picture of what's going on here. Okay, so this is a paper we published a few years ago. This is work done by Bill LaCava, who was a postdoc in the lab and developed the recommender system, the AI that the system uses. And Bill's now an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and Boston Children's Hospital, where he's continuing to work on these kinds of things. So this is the evaluation paper we did. So when we developed Aliro, we thought we had something pretty cool, but we didn't know if it was actually learning with experience. So we had to design an experiment to test that. So what we did was we presented Aliro with different data sets sequentially, and then basically measured the performance improvement over time as it experienced more and more data sets. And that's what you're looking at here. This is one of the figures from that paper. So think of the x-axis as experience, where it says iteration. Think of that as, okay, every iteration it's learning more and more, getting better and better by experiencing new data sets. And then the y-axis is the change from the difference between what Aliro is finding and what we think the best result for that data set should be. So the lower the value, the better. Now the baseline, look at the top, look at the blue open circles at the top. That's if you just choose models randomly. You can see, it's the performance is always the same because there's no learning happening. The yellow squares are if you just pick models based on average performance, you can see that doesn't really get us anywhere. But there were several methods that did show evidence of learning. And what we actually use is a singular value decomposition algorithm for analyzing the matrix of results in that database that Aliro has access to. So that matrix gets bigger and bigger on the x-axis as time goes on. And you can see that purple line at the bottom. After about 50 data sets, there's a significant increase in performance. And as it experiences more and more data, it gets better and better. So that singular value decomposition is what we actually use in the recommender system. And this demonstrates that it actually is learning as it experiences more and more data. And one of the common questions I got in the early days of presenting this is, well, that's great, but how does it compare to the state-of-the-art automated machine learning methods that are out there? And AutoSclearn was one of the first and most widely used in addition to our TPOT method. And so we did a head-to-head comparison, and we showed here in this experiment that Aliro actually is pretty competitive with AutoSclearn, and in some cases performs just as well. And we didn't set out to develop the most powerful automated approach. We set out to develop the most user-friendly, but in doing so, it actually performs quite well. So let me show you a real data example. And we wanted to do a head-to-head comparison with a deep learning algorithm. So this was at a time when everybody was doing deep learning and everybody was applying deep learning to every problem they had. And so we found this paper published in Scientific Reports in 2019, and they had built a type of deep learning algorithm called a long short-term memory deep learning algorithm, which is good for time series data. And they were looking at ICU data, physiologic measures of ICU patients, and this was a data set of 60,000 ICU patients that you could get access to through a data use agreement. This is called the MIMIC data set, if you're familiar with MIMIC. This is from a data set from one of the Boston hospitals. So it's a big sample size, rich data, time series data, nice deep learning result in this paper. So this was perfect because we could get access to this data. We could do a head-to-head comparison of Aliro with the deep learning algorithm. So the results are shown here. In the top part are the Aliro results. So each row in that table is a different Aliro result where it says AI as source. We also had a medical student in the lab who didn't know anything about machine learning, and we put them in front of Aliro and just said, do whatever you want. And so that's where it says user. So think of that as a naive user results just for comparison's sake. And Aliro automatically found a gradient boosting algorithm. You can see the hyperparameters there that had a training accuracy of 0.9 based on 5-fold cross-validation, and had a testing area under the ROC curve on a holdout data set of 0.85. And that was equivalent with overlapping confidence intervals with the LSTM shown in the table just below that, which had a area under the ROC curve of 0.86. So Aliro was able to automatically find an off-the-shelf machine learning algorithm, tune the parameters, and it performed just as well as a fancy deep learning algorithm that somebody spent months developing and published. And not only that, Aliro did that in about an hour, and it takes the LSTM about 30 hours to run on this data set. So it did it in a fraction of the time. It did it automatically without human input, and was very competitive with this result. So this demonstrated to us that yes, this works, and it works on complex data. So Aliro is open source. I'll say that it's super easy to use, but the installation's a little tricky because it's built on what are called Docker containers, which are little computing environments with its own operating system. So the installation's a little complex, but the idea is you install this on your own server. It'll run on your laptop. If you install Docker on your laptop, you can install this. It'll run on your laptop. And we're creating an educational version of this as well, Aliro Ed, which I'm not going to have time to talk about today. But if you're interested, let me know. You set this up on your own server, behind your own firewall with your own data, and you run it locally and access it through a web browser. And we're happy to help you if you need help. All right, so let me, in the last minutes, tell you about some of the new things that we're working on. This is a paper we just published in October on using large language models to expand the functionality of Aliro. And so what we did was we added an expert tab in Aliro with access to ChatGPT. So it gets your credentials and logs into ChatGPT. And what you can do is enhance the pre-processing of any data that you have in the Aliro database. So here's an example where we said, I would like to remove outliers from a data set. Can you write some Python code to do this? ChatGPT says, sure, here's some Python code for removing outliers and using interquartile range. And what happens is the prompt goes out to ChatGPT. ChatGPT writes the Python code. We pull that Python code back and execute it on our server. The data set gets manipulated and then shows up in Aliro. And then all you have to do is go and push the button, and you're doing machine learning on this now cleaned data set with outliers removed. You can ask it to do visualization. You can ask it to do pretty much anything that you want. We put it in an expert tab because obviously if you've played with ChatGPT, it makes mistakes, right? It hallucinates. So you need to be an expert because you actually have to go review the code and make sure it's accurate before you trust it. So I wouldn't suggest naive users use this functionality. But if you're a data scientist and you know what you're doing, this puts at your fingertips within our tool the ability to do lots of interesting things with data before you get to the machine learning part of it. So this is one thing that we've added. And the next thing is in response to a significant limitation of most AI and machine learning. What most of us do is we take a big data set, we apply machine learning, and we take those results and do something with it. But the machine learning, I think this gets at your question, the machine learning doesn't know anything about the problem that you're studying. And it can't use all the knowledge that you have in your head or that's in the literature to help solve that problem. And I think that's a big weakness of how we do machine learning, the fact that it knows nothing about our problems. So we're trying to remedy that. And this is work done in my lab by Joe Romano, who is a postdoc with me at Penn, and Trevor Penning, who runs our ran the NIEHS P30 Center for Environmental Toxicology at Penn. And what Joe did was he built a computational toxicology database, knowledge base. And what he did was integrated more than 20 different sources of knowledge about genes, chemicals, drugs, diseases, pathways, adverse outcome pathways, et cetera, and integrated them using an ontology so you can understand the semantic relationships between all the entities. This chemical increases risk of this disease would be an example of a semantic relationship. Puts that all in a special database called a graph database, so all the relationships are preserved. So that's CompTox AI. And then my goal is to use this kind of knowledge to expand the functionality of TPOT and Aliro. So this is an example of, what the network looks like with anchored by dioxin in this case. And so you have adverse outcome pathways and other chemicals in here and diseases. And this is the tool. It's a database called Neo4j, a type of graph database. Unfortunately, it's not user friendly. And that's what I've been working on to address. You have to understand the query language. It's a special language called Cypher to get anything out of it. So it's not user friendly. So what we did was ask this question, well, can we use ChatGPT to query this knowledge base? So that you can ask a question like, show me all the genes that are related to dioxin and bladder cancer. You can ask that question and have ChatGPT give you the answer extracted from this knowledge base. As expected, at least for us, we knew this wouldn't work when we did it, but we did it to illustrate the weaknesses of ChatGPT. Out of the box, the accuracy was no better than flipping a coin. So ChatGPT could not answer basic questions about our knowledge base. And it makes sense because ChatGPT is trained on text from what's out there on the internet. And our knowledge base is a synthesis of that text at a higher level, building relationships, and ChatGPT it didn't have access to all of that, that higher level synthesis from primary publications. So as expected, ChatGPT performs poorly. I just submitted on Saturday this paper on a new method we call Kragen, which involves sort of cutting edge large language model technology to get the large language models to do what we want and answer questions about our knowledge base. Now, this is a little bit technical, so bear with me. But if you want to get a large language model to understand your specific problem, then you have to engineer the system in the way I'm going to explain. And think of it this way: some of you might keep a diary beside your bed, and imagine later wanting ChatGPT to answer. You might give it access, and you might not want to do that. But just for illustrative purposes, ChatGPT knows nothing about your diary. And how do you get it to answer questions about your diary? What was I doing on March 27th, 2003? And for ChatGPT to understand that. And so here's what you have to do. You basically take, and we have this knowledge graph, and think of all the connections of entities as sentences. So we take, chemical, gene, disease as a sentence, and we take out all the thousands of sentences from the knowledge base. We put that in a special database called a vector database. And all you need to know is that makes representing it in this vector form makes it super fast to search. Then you take your prompt, your question, what genes are related to dioxin and bladder cancer? You take that prompt that you would otherwise give to ChatGPT, and you match it in this vector database to all the vectors of knowledge. And it does a matching, and you get the top ranked matches. Then you take those matches in the prompt, and then you give that to ChatGPT, and now ChatGPT can understand and answer questions about it. So it's a little technical, but you have to do these tricks to get ChatGPT to do what you want it to do and to do it accurately. And then on top of that, we added this other cutting edge idea called graph of thoughts. Simply, this is a way to break down complex questions that you might ask of the knowledge base. You might say, show me a list of genes that are related to dioxin and bladder cancer. That's a complex question because the large language model has to understand, okay, I'm interested in dioxin, I'm interested in bladder cancer, I got to find two lists, and then I got to bring those two lists together and find the intersection. So that's a complex task that ChatGPT struggles with. So we basically break that question down into pieces, we query the database, and then bring it back together. That's this graph of thoughts, and these graphs can get pretty complex. It allows you to do much more sophisticated questioning with the knowledge base. All right, so sorry for getting into too much technical detail here, but this is all necessary to really get ChatGPT to do your bidding. So here's an example, here's some results. We constructed over 1,000 true-false questions of the knowledge base and of CompTox AI, and over 500 multiple choice questions. And right out of the box, ChatGPT fails miserably, but with these new enhancements, it actually does quite well. All right, so you can kind of get the picture of what I'm putting together here. We have Aliro, which makes it easy for you to do machine learning. We have the large language model for generating code, which expands the options for data scientists. And we have this knowledge base about toxicology and environmental health science that's of interest to all of you that we can now query using natural language. You can just ask it questions and it will give you the answers using all this fancy large language model technology behind the scenes. You can start to think about how you might piece together what I was talking about earlier, this sort of kiosk idea where you're walking up, asking questions, having the AI do things, and getting the answers that you want and the models that you want. We're really close to piecing together all of this technology to get it to do this. And I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm hopeful in the next 5 years that we will be able to do this in a way that's just seamless and easy. And because that's, at the end of the day, we as scientists, that's what we want, right? Research is hard. And we spend so much of our time banging our head against the wall. Finding the right piece of code or finding the right collaborator, finding the right data scientist who understands large language models that can do something for us. That all takes months. Why should it take months? With a tool like this, you could do these things in a matter of minutes or hours rather than months or years. So that's my vision, and hopefully I've convinced you that we're getting close to that. And let me just thank the Aliro team. Nick Matsumoto is my lead software engineer, who's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And June and Jay have done most of the programming. Miguel has managed the project, but this is also the team that did all the large language model work. CompTox AI was developed by Joe Romano, and we've created other versions of this. We've created a specific version of this for Alzheimer's disease, and we can spin off virtually any disease using this knowledge base. There's our GitHub and the CompTox AI website if you want to take a look, and of course go blue. And here's my email address. Feel free to email me if we can work together. Love to collaborate with people here at the U. So thank you. Oh, and questions. And this is sorry, just one more. This is where we work. This is the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood. This is in the design district of LA, and these buildings were built to showcase furniture and glassware and stuff. And Cedars-Sinai is renting space in these buildings for research. This is part of what we call the North Campus. I'm in the green building on the 5th floor. That's where my department is. And Cedars-Sinai is about a 10-minute walk down the street. So I'll stop there, and hopefully there's time for a few questions.
I know it may not be your purview, but is there any evidence that OpenAI itself may be incorporating some of these concepts like vector analysis and the graph of thoughts to improve their chat GDP package?
Yes, but still, they don't know anything about our knowledge base, right? They're just training on text that's out there that they have access to. So for the kinds of specific problems that all of us in this room are interested in, ChatGPT is still going to be limited in what it can do. Even though OpenAI has, of course, the latest, greatest technology first. And I think this is an important message that I like to make clear, is that we as biomedical researchers or biological researchers, we have to take AI and tailor it to our specific problems. It doesn't always work right out of the box. And there's some magic, some secret sauce that has to happen for us to get it to do what we want it to do. And the big companies don't know about that or don't care. So there's a gap there that needs to be filled by us as academics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
A lot of these machine learning models, they work well, perform well when we are interested in prediction and have large sample size. But in epidemiology, we are dealing with it's usually smaller sample size, and we are mostly interested in inference as opposed to prediction. How do you think we could use some of these methods in situations like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a big difference between doing prediction and doing inference. And it's important to understand that the scientific questions are different, the interpretations very different. I think there's a place for this in inferential statistics. And inferential statistics has gotten pretty complex. Linear modeling is not the same as when I learned it here over in the stats department at UM. It's much more complex now. There's, functional analysis, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. So I think automated methods like this can help even on the inferential side. And I would steer you toward a project which I think has not been developed further, but there in the book I mentioned, there's a chapter from a group I think they're in Boston University maybe, called the automatic statistician, which will try to automate running analyses, interpreting results, and even writing kind of the methods and results sections of papers. That's kind of their goal. So I think there's a place for this, but it has to be thought through very carefully. Inference is a whole different ballgame, right? Because you have to be sure you're right. Whereas prediction is not as strict, right? Because you're predicting something, but you're not necessarily making a statement about what's true. So it's a more relaxed set of assumptions.
As you mentioned in one of your first slides on exposure assessment, space is very important, geographical locations. If you look at GeoAI or, because in your example, I haven't seen the example where they are, you use geographical location or spatial dependence or.
Yeah, I would say the time series data is the closest we've gotten to that, processing time series data using these approaches, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't use spatial information. It's just how you code the data in tabular form. You can feed it direct, and that's what we did with the time series data, just convert it to tabular form so the AI can understand the data. So you could do that with spatial data as well.
So if you send a grant to NIH, do you just put this into your statistics expert section, or how do you involve like statisticians? And what do you think what are your thoughts on having statisticians to co-work with these tools that you're developing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I gave this talk at Cornell virtually last week, and there was a statistician in the audience who got really bent out of shape about this presentation. And I failed to make the point, I think it was my mistake, that it is important to have a team. And, you don't want to rely, yes, these tools make it easy for anybody to do AI, but you still need AI experts in the loop. You still need statisticians in the loop to validate what's happening here and interpreting the results and making sure the results are trustworthy. And there's only so much the AI can do. So everybody can put their hands on AI, but I think you still need collaborators to make, if nothing else, as a sanity check, right? To make sure you're not doing something crazy or stupid. So yeah, I think I still believe in team science, and I think teams are important. But what I would say is if you bring a team of people together, like what happens in your P30 grant here that we're here for today, you bring a team of experts together, toxicologists, epidemiologists, statisticians, machine learning folks, you bring that team together. What I would say is a tool like this will help accelerate what that team can do and make it easier and faster to get to an end result, get to a publishable result, than not using a tool like this. That's what I would say. You have a question?
Yeah, first off, thank you so much for this talk. It's both futuristic and pretty incredible in that way. Also, I really appreciate the way in which you're trying to make things accessible to lots of people. I sort of had two questions, but I won't take up too much of my time. One of the things you focused on in terms of performance, right, was sort of, predictability and things like that. Have you thought of including consistency across different approaches? So do you get the same key predictors, if you run multiple different versions as opposed to just, what's the R-squared or something like that for each version?
Yeah, I think there's no reason why you shouldn't do kind of a form of bootstrapping where you present different sampled versions of the data to the algorithm to see if you give it 10 versions of the data sampled with replacement, do you always get similar answers? You know, that would be something you could do. You would have to do that yourself. We don't have that built into this tool, but I think something like that's a great idea. Or like I said, you could take the Python code that generates the model and you could apply that to 10 bootstrap data sets to look for consistency. So yes, I think your question's a good one, but right now you would have to engineer Aliro to do that.
I just second question, let somebody else go first.
Yeah.
So, as a non-AI people and a lab scientist, I'm worried about losing my job. But I mean, from just what I heard from you, great talk, I think I don't really need to worry about this moment. However, we see a great potential for the AI and the lab scientists or the knowledge-based research. So what's your recommendation, suggestions, especially for the young people here? So what they should do to take advantage of this system, the approach?
Yeah, well, I don't think you have to worry about losing your job. And I think it's exactly what I said earlier in response to another question about, you know, is OpenAI going to just replace all of us, right? But OpenAI doesn't have the time or energy to focus on our specific problems. So I think we as experts are still going to have to be in the loop. And I think I'm a big believer that AI is going to work better when the human is in the loop, both before and during the AI and after the AI. And that's something else we're working on is how do we build humans into this, where the human is giving feedback and the AI is learning from the human. And I think you know, a lot of people talk about augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, that AI is going to augment what we can do and make us better. And I firmly believe that. So I don't think anybody's gonna lose their jobs. But I do think if you're a classically trained statistician, you have to get up to speed on these methods because everybody's using ChatGPT, and very few people understand how ChatGPT works and what its limitations are. And where it can go wrong and lead you down a wrong path. So I think we're now squarely in the AI era, and I think every one of us, regardless of our background or expertise, is going to have to get up to speed with AI and learn the basics, learn the risks, learn where it can fail, and have a sensibility about it. Just like when we go buy a car. Right, you can go buy a car and you're going to be more successful if you have a sensibility about how the auto dealer is looking to, you know, to gouge you or take advantage of you. And we live in a complex world, and I think AI is the same way. We have to learn about it. We have to learn to live with it. We have to learn what its limitations are.
Have you or like because when we select models, sometimes we have priorities. Do you think about because I saw that your convention is only based on best performance. Possible that we do also only prioritize the interpretability or prioritize sensitivities or precisions, something like that.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And when I talk about our teapot method, I get into that because teapot can do what's called multi-objective optimization. And I'm a big believer in that because we don't only care about the area under the ROC curve or the predictive accuracy. We care about a whole bunch of other things like interpretation or utility or usefulness. And you can build that into the reward system of the machine learning model. And we've published papers on that. So I'm a big believer in that approach. Absolutely. It's just like when you buy a car, you don't just focus on the price or the gas mileage or the model of the car or the color of the car, right? We are a multi-objective problem solver. We're trying to balance all the 10 different objectives when we buy a car or when we choose a mate. We're balancing, we make sacrifice, some things we like and some things we don't like. Everything's a balance, and the same is true for machine learning. And we need to think about machine learning models in that way and not rely on a single measure. So it's a great question.
Hi, Jason. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you here. So I was just thinking, that GUI interface is really nice. And also oftentimes what we're dealing with is not just AI methods that are actually, already mature enough in the package, like SVM and other stuff. What we are usually dealing with, for example, single cell field, there's a bloom of new tools coming out every single day. Some of them are very complex, using combinations of statistics versus machine learning methods, very complex models. And on top of that, what's really annoying to me is that they also have different requirements in terms of data pre-processing. So I was just wondering, it would be great for people to actually have a way to automatically benchmark different types of methods in a very fast accelerating area of research, such as single cell spatial field, but we can, compare the methods and get results at a fingertip really quickly. I think that's really, really important for us to move forward as a community together, because right now it's very difficult to compare across different methods, and there's always new methods coming out. So what's your thought on this? I think possibly to adopt your concept to that kind of problems as well.
So Dr. Garmeyer, if you don't know her, is a methodologist looking at big omics data. And, one of the problems for those of us that are methodologists that develop methods and tools is the lack of benchmarks that she mentioned. How do you know if a new tool is working well? And this is a problem the machine learning and AI community has faced for a really long time. There just aren't good benchmarks to be able to say one method's better than another method, where you know the ground truth and you know what a method is supposed to find. This is something we as a community have to work much harder on. And I can say I've tackled this myself and developed an AI to develop better benchmarks. We can evaluate the algorithms that we're generating. And I spent 3 years developing an AI that could generate better benchmarks. And it turned out to be a really hard problem, which is why I think people don't work on it. It sucked up a lot of time in my lab working on this. So I don't have a good answer for you. I think it's incredibly important. Yes, we need to do this, but it's super hard. And most people end up benchmarking on real data. And the problem with that is with real data, you have no idea what the right answer is, right?
Right. So you're going into, into trouble either way. With real data, I don't know the gold truth. With the simulated data, it's too simplistic, not the real.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And I don't have a good answer for you other than we need to do more of it and spend more time on benchmarking.
My question is about, as we were discussing methods. So when you're doing machine learning or multivariate analysis or something like the PCA, those kind of stuff, when we report the results, normally we are asked to report the univariate, bivariate, traditional methods as well along with it. So, but with the big data and multi-omics data and something is not appropriate, but I don't know how to answer that question, if you are asked to do that.
Yeah, I think there's no downside to trying to complement a machine learning result with traditional statistical results that people are used to seeing, and that would kinds of things that would survive peer review at New England Journal of Medicine, for example. I think that's important. And one way to look at it is the reason we do AI and machine learning is to find the unexpected, to find the things that we would miss using more traditional approaches. That's why we do machine. So I think there's value in doing the standard bivariate or univariate statistical approach. What does that tell you? What is machine learning telling you that's different from that? And that can open some doors to new questions and new avenues of investigation.
Because something like the fall discovery rate correction and all those things with the univariate methods and stuff. So sometimes with the AI model or the new model, like machine learning model, might not be looking as powerful as it is basically with the predictive parameters and whatever the model is showing to you. So it's hard to convince on that side.
But it also gets back to what we were talking about earlier, the difference between prediction and inference. And you have to really understand the difference between those two things. There are different goals, different assumptions, different scientific questions. And so if you're trying to compare an inferential method with a predictive method, you're going to run into trouble because they're two very different things.
Great. So
Right.
let's thank
Thank you.
Moore again for this excellent talk. Okay, so there's so lunch actually is in the next door, and then for the afternoon section, we actually need to switch to another room. The room number is 1655. So after lunch, we'll meet you and we will have in our room. Okay, so thank you all for coming.